In this video, we'll talk about converting fractions into decimals. And we'll also kind of talk about what fractions are useful to turn into decimals and what fractions are not. So let's go ahead and start right in. Let's say we wanted to convert 1/2 into a decimal. Let's think about what this really means. This fraction line means I'm going to take 1 divided by 2, which means I'll take 1, or I'll take 2 and divide it into 1. Now I think we can all see here, 2 does not go into 1. So we put a 0 there, we do our decimal. 2 goes into 10 5 times, and then goes 0. So we have 0.5. So 1/2 equals 0.5, also known as 5/10. This would be our tenths place, which would make sense. So this is what we call a terminating decimal. And it just means it stops. It's 0.5, it's done. Okay? So these terminating decimals are very useful to turn into or convert from fractions into. They're useful to use if you're trying to do calculations. Sometimes 0.5 can be easier to use than 1/2. Some other examples of terminating decimals would be 1/4, that's 0.25, 1/8, 0.125, you got 1/5, which is 0.2, 1/10 is 0.1, so on and so forth. There's a lot of these. They keep going. And there's a lot that are useful here. By and large, these are friendly fractions that if you're not too sure on your fraction skills, you can utilize these decimals instead, if you would prefer. We just have to be very careful with our calculation after the fact. Let's look at another case here. Let's say we're looking at 1/3 and I want to convert that into a decimal. Well, that's the same as 1 divided by 3, which means we're going to take 3 into 1. Okay, 3 does not go into 1. It does, however, go into 10. So it would go in there 3 times. We have 9. We're back to 1. Bring down a 0. Then we have 9 again. And then it just keeps going. So this is going to be a repeating decimal. It's not going to stop. I can just keep doing this 10, then 9, 10, then 9, 10, then 9, 10, then 9. It never is going to stop. So a way we write this in mathematics, 1/3 is equal to 0.3 repeating. Now you got to be very careful here because a lot of calculators, they will only go so far. They'll only go so many digits. And even at that point, it's an estimate. There's a huge difference between 0.3 and 1/3. They are not the same thing. So we have to be very careful about this fact. These are repeating decimals. And they might not always be one digit repeating. It might be a series. It might be a pattern of 4 or 5 digits that start repeating. And generally these fractions, it's easier to use the fraction form than try to do the decimal form. So just be cautious. Some other examples of repeating decimals would be 1/6. That would be 0.16 repeating. We can look at 1/7. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but I do know it is repeating. We're looking at 9ths, 11ths, and I believe 13ths. They make for very strange decimals, and it's hard to be exact if you're using the decimal form. It's actually impossible to be exact. There's no way to punch in enough 0.3s on 1/3. So we just have to be careful working with these. These kind of leave us with the only option of dealing with the fraction if we want to do arithmetic with them and be exact.